Bob Scully's World Show is made possible in part by GDI, Commercial Cleaning Services, one provider, one solution. And by Clocks Technologies. Biophotonic lighting manages skin from within.
Hi, this is Bob Scully, and welcome to another edition of the World Show, Entrepreneurs of the Free Markets series. Say, how many Bitcoin have you made lately? You haven't made any? Well, how many do you own? You don't own any? Well, what do you know about it? You don't know anything about it, but you've surely heard of it, and it is one of the most fascinating topics in economics today. And really, you're like the rest of us. I don't own any, I never made any, and I barely know how it works. And that's why I've turned to one of the most intelligent men I know in the field of economics, Peter St Onge, chief economist at the Montreal Economic Institute, to talk about Bitcoin and finally clear it up for me. Here he is. Peter St Onge, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Today, as usual, we're going to talk free markets in this series, but we're going to talk about one very fascinating aspect, the intersection of free markets and the world of currency, and especially Bitcoin, which fascinates everybody, but nobody understands it. And everybody's talking about it. It's like a character in a spy novel. And I'm the first to admit I'm not too sure what it is, but you will, of course, tell us. And I was looking for, having researched it a bit, for an analogy. No analogy is perfect, but what came to me as I read about the evolution of currencies around the world is what happened to airlines not so long ago. A generation ago, airlines were inherently very national. They were standard bearers for their country. The colors on the tail wing were the colors of the flag. The name of the country was integrated in the trademark of the airline. And it really was practically like the United Nations when you went to the airport. Go to the airport today, that's all gone. It's something else. It's multinationals. It works and it's okay, but it's not what it was. It's not segments of nationalities. It's not the United Nations anymore. And I have a feeling the same thing, the same pressure is being applied to currencies with the euro that took over 20 countries into its fold, and that the bills in our pockets with the pictures of a president or a prime minister or a queen, those things are already belong to the past and are fading, and currencies are becoming something much more fungible. What is going on according to you?
Yeah, well, that's a really great comparison that I've never heard before, frankly, so that's excellent. But right, absolutely. There are 200-odd currencies in the world. They all work essentially on the same principles. This is the central bank principle, pioneered largely by the Bank of England about 200 years ago. They all work on the same principles, meaning that you have inflation more or less built into the currency. Sometimes it's relatively slow, such as the US or Britain. Sometimes it's a lot faster, like Venezuela or Zimbabwe, iconically. But inflation is baked into it. And so this, you have this gradual transfer from regular people that through the government that goes out to the loan market. But the point is that people feel like they're being ripped off, right? People feel like money is being stolen from them. You then have a second problem, which is that once governments are controlling the currency, you can get a lot of irresponsible behavior spreading through the market. So one of the most iconic, of course, the 2008 financial crisis. Essentially, the government covered bets. Right?
Yes.
It told a lot of financial outfits that they could speculate, and if it turns against you, then we'll take care of it. And the fact that governments control currency means that they have a lot of leeway in how they can do bailouts.
They're the boss.
They are the boss. They can decide who to channel that inflation towards. So something called Cantillon effects. So there's a lot of theft and irresponsibility that gets multiplied in financial markets because the government controls the currency. Now, financial firms themselves don't necessarily want. They don't want risk. Right? The essence of the financial system is that bankers want the people to be able to trust the institution. They want to do an honest business.
Sure.
take in deposits, make out loans. This is the essence of the banking business, make investments in some cases. So they don't necessarily like that kind of instability. They certainly don't have an opinion about the sort of organized theft from regular people through the inflation process. So
they're part of it.
They end up getting forced to play a game that they themselves wouldn't necessarily choose. So the idea of cryptocurrencies is that you can introduce new currencies that it's not just like a new country having a brand new paper currency with central bank and such. Now you've got new currencies that are just structured completely differently. You don't have built-in inflation. There's no centralized issuer who can wake up one morning and decide to slide $2 trillion over towards his buddies, right? Which that's approximately that's happened oddly enough.
They shall remain nameless, but we know who they are.
Yeah, for sure. So it's the sort of economic characteristics of a cryptocurrency are in many ways superior to traditional paper currency. And I believe that the financial sector would like to use these. The problem at the moment is that governments, this is a worldwide problem, governments worldwide have not really decided how they want to treat cryptocurrency, how they want to tax it, how they want to regulate it. There's a raft of laws involving money transfer or money transmitting. And those laws are quite stringent because they're based on the sort of traditional money transmitting industry, which is small. It's not happening on a personal level.
Yeah.
So that's not really appropriate for the crypto space. So a lot of the big players, banks, insurance companies, they don't want to get involved with blockchain or cryptocurrency in general because they're concerned that down the line the regulators might make up new laws and then they'll run afoul of those.
There's another striking image that you have in your writings about that, where you say the power of these cryptocurrencies is so great that one of them could crush the US dollar the way Amazon crushes a bookstore. That's pretty revealing, that's pretty eloquent, and a little bit scary because this is taking place in the digital universe where you're not bound by coin or paper or anything physical, and you're barely bound by the algorithms and so on. People can pretty much do what they want. That's tremendous power and a bit dangerous.
Depending on, there are some organizations who've become shaped around the way that paper currencies work today. Those people are going to fight it without a question. But the thing is, if you take a metaphor in retail, for example, so for a long time, when you were shipping goods to a store, they had to be hand carried. There were a bunch of guys who were picking up a sack of potatoes, moving them here and there, right? Incredibly inefficient. And then, of course, you got standardization containers that were standard size to go onto a truck or onto a ship, and that it enormously increased the productivity of retail, right? So similarly, the fundamental characteristics of a cryptocurrency, because it doesn't have to be centralized, it can have an extraordinarily light footprint in terms of how many computers you need, how many staff you need to run the currency.
Yeah.
Because it's similar to container shipping, right? You could massively improve the efficiency inside of finance. For the financial industry as a whole, that would be incredibly, that would be fantastic, right? If they can lower prices to consumers, they can then grow the business, right? There could be many more transactions that regular consumers could engage in because they're so much cheaper.
Yes, but, and I can hear people at home thinking this or saying this, they've heard this before. They will say, I was convinced or seduced into handing over all my data to the great retailers of America, Sears and Target and Winners and whoever, and I was told how efficient it would be, and it's true, it is efficient, but it's also efficient when you get hacked, and I got hacked, and all my data's gone, or my identity was stolen. These are things that can happen, and that's why they scare people, and they seem quite dangerous. Right,
and Bitcoin is the oldest cryptocurrency, so it's been around for around about 10 years now. The coin itself has never been hacked, Hacked meaning somebody stealing coin and giving it to themselves or giving it to somebody else. The coin itself has never been hacked. The Bitcoin hacks that you read about in the newspaper, those are normally centralized websites or centralized databases that are some other business related to Bitcoin. Okay, so for example, you might have a Bitcoin exchange where you log on to there, you open an account, you buy your Bitcoin using dollars. Okay, that's sort of a side business. It uses Bitcoin, but it's like a business built on top of Bitcoin, right? Just as Amazon is built on top of the internet, Mt. Gox, for example, was the biggest hack in the crypto space, and Mt. Gox was a service that you could transact crypto, but it wasn't based on crypto. So the hacking issue, the point there is that the businesses that have been hacked in that space have been businesses that are structured exactly in the old-fashioned way that crypto is trying to replace. Okay, the old-fashioned way that you would structure an online business, for example, is that you have a database, you have some sort of interface on top of it, which is just how the people get on. It's when you go to your bank, you log in, you have a website, and then there's some database behind that. And that's a centralized service, okay? And it's what's called in the hacker community, it's a honeypot, okay?
Yeah.
It's something very attractive that hackers might try to come in. If they can compromise the bank security, then they can make off with your money, right? And so crypto doesn't have a honeypot, okay? It's a honeypot, right? It would be attractive to attack it, but it's never been successfully hacked. All right, now many people have tried to hack Bitcoin.
But why not?
For sure, because it's anonymous money.
No, I mean, why can't it be hacked?
I don't know enough about the technology, but it's because it's empirically it's never been hacked. From what I understand of it, because it's based on blockchain, blockchains are unhackable. Blockchains are based on consensus system, meaning that you have many computers all over the world. They could be in Alaska, Quebec, Chile, wherever. And all of these computers they're recording transactions. Okay, when they record a transaction, they tell all the other computers, hey, I saw this bunch of transactions. And then when the computers agree with each other, when 51% agree with each other, then they say, okay, this is the truth.
It's a valid transaction.
Exactly. And the way that a traditional bank works, it has one computer. It might have a backup, but the computers aren't competing with each other. It's essentially got one computer that's processing everything, and it sort of announces to the world, okay, I figured out the answer. Bob gave Peter $100. Okay, so and there's a whole list of transactions that the bank computer comes up with. Now, if you can break into that bank computer and change some of those numbers, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? You can transfer all the money to yourself. In Bitcoin, because you have all of these different computers all over the world and they're working on consensus, you would have to go and break into each single one. Okay, now that's theoretically possible, but it would take so many resources that it would not be worth it.
And who owns those computers?
Various people, so they're called miners, okay? And what a mining computer, people in the early days of Bitcoin, it was just standard. You could do it on your computer at work, you could do it on your phone, you could mine on your phone. The basic idea is that your computer solves a bunch of garbage equations, okay? They're just solving equations in order to consume processing power, right? And which sounds odd, but I'll come back to the reason for that, which is called proof of work. Okay, so the computer is solving a bunch of puzzles, which have no value, and then in the process of solving,
it's like an entrance exam.
Yeah, exactly. So by doing that, they win the right to gather the information from all the transactions and to present their version of what they think reality is. Okay, and the reason why they bother doing that is because there's what's called a block reward. A certain amount of new Bitcoin is minted every 10 minutes. Okay, so this is a form of inflation. It's currently running about 2% per year. Okay, so there is inflation in Bitcoin, but it's built in through the equation. Okay, so it's a standard predictable rate of inflation that nobody can change it. So in the process of running these computers, you end up getting a little bit of payment. Okay, so that's what incentivizes the miners, okay, to actually run their machines, and then a whole bunch of people are doing that all over the world. Okay, so each of them are getting some probability of a little payment from the brand new Bitcoin that's born every 10 minutes.
And they cannot contradict.
You can try it. So for example, I could set up my computer and I could say, okay, guess what? All these other computers, I saw a transaction where Bob gave me a bill, or the Bank of Canada gave me $1 trillion, but I would be only one computer claiming that. And all of the other computers would be seeing a different version of reality, right? Because every time there's a transaction, it gets put onto basically a long ledger. All the computers can read that. So I'd be saying, I got $1 trillion. All the other computers would say, nah, I'm not seeing that. And so my version of reality is not 51%, so I'm out of there.
Is there anybody manning these computers at a keyboard in front of a screen somewhere on the planet?
Usually, you set them up and just let them sit there. It looks like a server inside of a business. You know, it just kind of sits there and works. There are server farms now, or mining farms, I guess they call them.
Yeah, like data mining.
Yeah, where you've got dozens or hundreds of these machines set up. They put them in cold places with cheap electricity, so Quebec is in the running.
And in the realm of being your own devil's advocate, or in the realm of we don't know what we don't know, one image also comes to mind. It's that lovely old naive British professor in Jurassic Park who thought he could create a new civilization, really bring the planet back by millions of years, and had it all figured out. But as the movie teaches us at the very end, it was a mistake. He didn't calculate nature correctly, and it went kaboom. And so whenever you're trying to manipulate an entire planetary phenomenon, it's exciting. You might have a tiger by the tail, but you might also get it wrong. The grain of sand that just paralyzes everything suddenly appears. And it's the sorcerer's apprentice problem, which I'm sure you've dealt with and have had to think about, and many people are probably thinking about. There is peril in there.
It absolutely is. And of course, that's also an issue with traditional systems, right? So if you organize something on a blockchain, the alternative is that you organize it on a database. And a database, fundamentally, the grand banks, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, these are all organized on often a single database. They're incredibly fragile.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
Right. So yeah, there's absolutely risk. We might want to go there gradually. We might not want to flip over to a national cryptocurrency tomorrow because we would like it to continue being tested along the way. I think that even advocates might be a little nervous about flipping over to crypto tomorrow. So what I think is more prudent is to recognize that there are risks in the current system. Some of them are technological risks, right? Just the way the databases work. Some of them are political risks, right? So in other words, in our system today, somebody could, it is certainly theoretically possible that hackers could come in and drain all the bank, all the money in the bank. Now, if that were to happen, then we all expect that governments will intervene. Right, they'll chase the bad guys.
And they're with their fiat money.
With their fiat money, right. Worst case scenario, the banks will just print up new money and give it to us, right? We have formal insurance schemes in both the U.S. And Canada do this. And so in a sense, there are risks in crypto for sure. The technology has not been around long enough. We can't say with certainty that it's unhackable. All we can say is that it hasn't been hacked. So there are risks, but there are also risks in the traditional traditional currencies, and a lot of those risks are hidden because, the way that the risk is solved is that government is standing there ready to seize, not exactly seize, but to print up the money, which effectively seizes it from all the holders.
Because it's inherently reassuring. It's been around for so long.
And also familiarity, right?
But,
right. Well, the currency's been around, but the computer systems that the currency runs on haven't been around for very long.
Now, let's get personal. Do you own Bitcoin?
I own a small amount of Bitcoin. My assumption early on, so I was sympathetic to the idea of Bitcoin, right, which is that you have private currencies that governments are not forcing people to use and are not fleecing investors and so on. I was sympathetic to the idea. In my own case, I was certain that government would ban it. There had been a case, a gentleman named Bernard Nothaus, and he had come up with something, I believe he called it the Liberty Dollar, the Liberty Coin. And he had made it out of pure silver, and he was selling them for whatever the price of silver was, so something like $50 per coin. but the coin said $1 on it, right? Because it was meant to look like a U.S. coin.
And that would be illegal.
They charged him with counterfeiting. So in theory, this would be the worst counterfeiter in history, right? So this would be a guy who took $50 in silver and made $1 coins and then allegedly was trying to pass them off at the grocery store or something. But the point is, that had happened a couple weeks before I first heard about Bitcoin. And I thought, oh, these poor kids, these poor hacker kids, they're all going to get arrested because you know, they're going after this guy where it's obviously not a fraud. Your $50 coins, you know.
It's more of a game, actually.
Yeah, or, you know, he was making it was almost a speech issue. He was making a commentary on the state of central banks through the coin. So if they got him, then I thought, oh, these poor Bitcoin kids are going to get, you know, they're all going to get thrown in jail. They're going to ban this thing. So I was amazed that they didn't ban it. I'm actually pleasantly surprised.
And concerning the Bitcoin that you own, your Bitcoin, do you get satisfaction, reassurance, aside from the pure wealth that it might represent? Do you get something out of it that's special because it is a cryptocurrency?
Bitcoin fluctuates a lot more, of course, and probably will continue to. There'd been an assumption that as it gets bigger, it won't fluctuate as much, but actually empirically the fluctuations have continued.
But you do own some, and you're not letting go of it, and so I take from that you are not predicting any future demise of this cryptocurrency. You think it's here to stay?
I wouldn't go that far. I own a speculative amount. I would generally recommend holding a speculative amount. Of course, when you're getting into personal finance, it depends on how old the person is. Do you have a family? Are you 25? Are you retired, et cetera?
And is it true? I'm told it is. It's not an urban legend about the signature, the computer signature of your Bitcoin. You cannot afford to lose that. You have to write it down or memorize it or do something. Otherwise, you end up like the poor fellow, I think in London, England, who threw away his Bitcoin or the piece of paper the number was written on, and then at a time when it wasn't worth much. And then later was desperate and was actually sifting through everything in the dump in London to get back his computer and his hard drive, to get back his number. That can happen.
Yeah, he had an old computer server, and he had a bunch of Bitcoin on the server. In other words, all the details that he would need to access the money were on the server, and he threw it out because back then Bitcoin wasn't worth anything, so he didn't even think about it. And then once Bitcoin went up, he realized, oh my gosh. So he contacted. At that point, there were several tons of garbage that had been piled on top of his server. So he went to the local authority and tried to get permission to dig in the dump, and they said, no, this is dangerous. It could explode with the gases or whatever. So it's still sitting there.
And is it true that what got this going, because it had been tried before many times to create a virtual currency or a new currency, and it never worked, it fell prey to speculation every time, except that in this case, the prime mover, the fellow behind it all, originally, he froze the quantity to 21 million or so, in such a way that it cannot be tampered with, and that immediately gave value and credibility and trust to the whole scheme.
That's right. Right, so it's a 21 million hard limit. The amount that's out there in the wild, mined, right? The amount that's out there is smaller, okay, and it's something like 10 million, I think, at this point, and it keeps growing at about 2% odd per year. That's to incentivize the miners to.
Nobody could issue it behind his back.
No, right. You would have to get 51% of the entire community to issue it. It would be as if every time that the central bank wanted to increase the amount of money out there, to dilute, to pour water into the wine of all Canadians' bank accounts, it would be as if every time they wanted to do that, they had to take a vote. And everybody's bank account could say, yes, I want you to give your friend money to dilute my dollars, or you could say, no, I'd prefer if you didn't do that. Now, in theory, I guess 51% could vote for that, but it would be quite unlikely. Yeah.
Well, Peter, this has been fascinating. I knew it would be, and I know there's plenty of people out there who are, I was going to say, running out of their home to go to the store and get some Bitcoin. They don't have to do that. All they have to do is this, and more power to them. Others, no doubt, are still skeptics, and most of us will probably fall in between those two extremes. But really, thank you for making it a lot clearer than when we started. And an idea has come to me just now. One of the central questions that we ask on this series is, when an industrial or agricultural or technological or digital revolution occurs, we all know from history that first it destroys jobs, and then eventually it gives us better jobs, better paying, and more numerous. But a lot of people are wondering now, and it is a central question, why aren't we seeing it? Why is it not happening this time? Where are these new jobs? It's a big question, and you're so good at all this, I would like to re-invite you to come back in the next issue to discuss that question with us if you want.
Perfect.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Peter St Onge was our guest this week on Entrepreneurs, the Free Markets series of the World Show. I'm Bob Scully. Have a great week. Thanks.
Bob Scully's World Show was made possible in part by GDI, Commercial Cleaning Services, one provider, one solution. And by Clocks Technologies, Biophotonic Lighting, manages skin from within.